Lokati here. Today we're going to be talking about our two-handed Flicker Strike build. This build is going to come in two distinct flavors. We're going to talk about the sword version now, and we'll talk about the mace version later. So let's go ahead and take a look at some of the gameplay. We've got some mapping, we've got some bossing, and we'll be right back. Writhing Imitation, level 83 boss, has 43 million health, and then Guardian boss mechanics on it. Our character does have a little bit of a ramp time, so it's not ideal to just dive into a boss with nothing up, but we'll hit it. And so Flicker Strike damage, and then Molten Strike damage, and he's dead. And so we're not going to use anything but Flicker Strike, so you can see the Flicker Strike only damage. And so you see once it ramps up, the damage gets pretty high, but we do have to generate rage and get our everything going in order to do damage on the bosses. So diving into a T17 boss with all your stuff rolling already makes a huge difference in how quickly you can kill it. And then we'll also look at a Molten Strike kill on the boss. Here we go, Searing Exarch, just a level 83 Searing Exarch, so 43 million health. We'll just do a Flicker Strike. Alright, as you can see, it maps very well, it bosses very well, and we're going to talk about the items and the gearing and the skill sets. So, first things first, what everyone always cares about is the high budget. The high budget on this two-handed Flicker Strike comes in two different variants. We have a high budget offensive and a high budget defensive. The defensive employs a Mage Blood belt to automate Ruby, Topaz, and Sapphire flasks for a massive elemental max hit to help stop spells from splattering you and bosses from splattering you with elemental damage. And then the high budget offensive one rocks 385 million Flicker Strike DPS. Now this is nothing crazy here as far as conditionals go. We did have some Molten Strike at the Zenith stuff in here before. We are running Cat's Agility here and 33% reduced effective onslaught to simulate the duration of Cat's Agility relative to Cat's Stealth, and everything else in here is fairly standard. Now, we are running a conditional stack that we use to scale the damage specifically for bosses or for large single targets. If you don't want extra buttons, you do not have to use any of these. These can all be replaced with other automations. Cast on Death Portal, if you can't stay alive, you can put a guard skill in here if you want some way to deal with different defenses like that. And if we do not use a single conditional, we are still rocking 214 million Flicker Strike DPS. And so we'll go over the conditionals real quick. Vol Smite provides an aura for us. We run it with more duration, so regular Smite gives you a 6-second aura. Vol Smite gives you a 12-second aura. We do have Vol Haste in here, which gives us a 6-second duration buff. Vengeful Cry can be combined with Berserk when you take a savage hit, to give you a large boost to your rage, as well as making sure that none of your rage decays from Berserk, giving you a tremendous burst of damage here. And so all these conditionals are just additional buttons that are available to you to take down large targets, to take down bosses easier, and then when you're running around on the map, you're just rocking 214 base million DPS for killing everything else. Now on our items here, we are running a sword. This is an Exquisite Blade. It is a T1 Tri-Ele sword with attack speed, crit, and crit multi-veiled. And then we are running the increased elemental damage affix on here. Now, in order to simulate these swords, they have to be manually edited because POB does not recognize the increased elemental damage affix that you put in here for runesmithing yet. And so each of the fire and the cold and the lightning damage have been doubled to simulate this as having 100% increased elemental damage. Your swords in the game are going to display a little bit differently, and if you used Awakened PoE, you'll be able to directly see the LE DPS of your sword. And this is a 2800 LE DPS sword. They go up to about 3,000 to 3,050 for like flawless, perfect, everything exactly the way it should be. And so this is pretty much almost a perfect sword. Lower tier swords, of course, will lower your damage over here, but this will give you a good idea of what you can aspire to. We are running a Haunted Bassinet with fizz damage taken as lightning, suppression, life, standard, defensive helm. These are super easy to craft, nothing complicated here. We are running a replica Feral's Fur, double corrupted with socketed duration and socketed gems. This just increases the damage of our Flicker Strike. If you are not running this, then you're going to lose a significant amount of damage in the high budget build. And so this is accounting for about 60 million of your DPS whenever you have conditionals up. It's about 30 million of your DPS when your conditionals are down. We're running some incursion gloves as opposed to frenzy gloves, and we're doing this to be able to get good stats on there for defenses as well as maintaining some very good damage. These are also very easily craftable. Ralakesh's boots with some spell suppression on them. You can also run spell suppression tattoos if you don't want to pay for the boots. Our Yoke of the Suffering is just a standard, very, very high LE res yoke with 10% increased damage taken. We are running a double corrupted taming with attack speed and lightning damage on it, and it is catalyzed for elemental damage. And then we're mirroring that with Calandra's Touch here. Our Arn's Anguish is also a double corrupted crit multi and attack speed while Flask is active. And then we're running a LE Penetration, Prismatic Tincture, a Jade Flask with evasion, a Progenesis for defense, a Granite Flask with armor, and a Diamond Flask with crit. So very, very standard setup here. For ailment immunity, we are relying on Storm Shroud Jewels with Murderous Eye Jewels for the shock avoidance. We have an Interrogation here with Corrupted Blood immunity on it, and we have Large Cluster Jewels that are Feed the Fury, Martial Prowess, and Calamitous. Now, both of these Large Cluster Jewels can have additional stats on them, but remember, you only get one actual node with those stats, so the additional stats are really not that valuable. We are using a Light of the Meaning to help our Chaos res stay high, and an Impossible Escape to get some nodes on the tree that give us some additional resistances as well as accuracy. Now for our skills themselves, we're running a typical Enlightened Summon Skitterbots Flesh and Stone and Grace. With Grace and our Watcher's Eye, we are sitting at 95% evasion during Wind Dancer. And so this gives us a tremendous defensive layer versus all hits that are coming in. We are running Arrogance with Precision for both the accuracy and the crit, Assassin's Mark with Mark on hit, Flicker Stripe tied to with Awakened Multi-Strike, Trinity, Awakened Elemental Damage with attacks, Volatility, and Ruthless. We have Blood Rage for some additional frenzy charges while we're running around mapping, as well as the attack speed and Leap Slam for movement, and again our conditionals right here. Now because our incredibly high attack rate, we do need both Less Duration and Swift Affliction in our aspect of the cat. So Feral's Fur can return enough charges to us so we don't fall flat on our face versus single target bosses. Now our higher budget, higher defenses option is almost identical. The only difference is the inclusion of the Mage Blood in here and some small changes to the flasks to compensate for that. Now on our high budget build tree, we have a very typical tree for the build. We have gone off to the side a little bit here because we needed one additional jewel for Murderous Eye Jewels for our shock avoidance. And then we've gone down here and taken Fortify here, Life here, Mana Mastery here, Two-Handed Mastery here. We have our Cluster Jewel here. We have our Frenzy Charge Generation and Charge Mastery here, Life here, Spell Suppression here, Life, Frenzy Charge. This is our Light of Meaning. We have Heartseeker here with Crit Multi, more Spell Suppression with Spell Suppress damage. We have Inversion right here, so we are not using any curses to affect elemental resistances. Life and Evasion over here, Cluster Jewel here, Mark Mastery here with 50% more accuracy against marked enemies. This allows us to not run a maxed out accuracy and still maintain 100% hit chance versus targets that matter, which would be rare and uniques. We have Leech Mastery here with Instant Leech, and we have a Frenzy Charge and a Power Charge up here. Now this tree will remain relatively the same going through all the different variations of the build, so there's not a tremendous amount of respecking that needs to be done as you gear your character out. Now the upper mid-budget version of the build is going to tag in somewhere between 50 and 75 Divine. We're using a Void Forge for our primary weapon. We're using again a crafted helmet. We're using a replica Feral's Fur with no corruptions on it. We're using some crafted gloves here. We're using crafted boots here. We're using a yoke here that's only 9%. We have some basic taming rings here, a Rizlatha's coil that's been catalyzed, another tincture, a lion's roar, jade sulfur, diamond flask. This could be swapped out for another granite flask if you needed some additional defenses here. And then ancestral vision for our ailment immunity with some additional ailment immunity on our boots. This saves us the points necessary to reach out and get that extra cluster jewel, which allows this build to operate at level 94 rather than 100. And then everything else is relatively the same, except our Watcher's Eye here would only have... In this budget, we would not be affording that Watcher's Eye. We're supposed to only have a Watcher's Eye with Grace on it, and the Grace Evasion Watcher's Eyes are relatively expensive whenever that's the only mod that is valuable on it. Usually coming in around 6 div on those. So we'll swap that one out. There we go. And so that'll give us our Grace node right there. Light of the Meaning at around 6 div. And so you've got 4 or 5 div on a Void Forge Sword. Probably 3 to 4 div in crafting these items. Maybe a little bit more if you're unlucky. A Replica Feral's Fur is a div. A Yoke of Suffering is 2 or 3. The Tamings are less than 1. Rizlatha's Coil is a couple. With the Catalyst, Flasks we don't count for. And then another 15 div in jewels here, so well under the 50 to 75 div budget that you need to get to be at this tier. And our Flicker Strike is doing 33 million DPS without conditionals. And again, if you want to utilize the conditionals in your play, then we can go ahead and use those, and this guy will do about 67 million DPS with the conditionals active. 62 million DPS with the conditionals active. We're only using Vol Haste for the Vol version of it here. So very, very solid DPS for the budget that it's at, along with very good defenses. We've got a 91k effective health pool, 18k max Fizz hit, 53k LE hits, 15k chaos hits, 4100 unreserved life, and a tremendous amount of leech as always coming in from Slayer. And so a very solid set of defenses for a two-handed Slayer in this budget level. Now, on our tree, we have a few small changes here. We are not dipping out over here to this side, and we have a few less points to play with in general as a result of being lower level on it, but the tree is mostly the same. Now we do have a Timeless Jewel here and a Timeless Jewel on the upper budget. Just as a quick reminder, if you need to pick a Timeless Jewel for your character, simply pick the budget that you're building towards, go to Find Timeless Jewel, and everything is already filled in. Don't touch this, don't touch this, don't touch any of this, don't touch any of this. All you have to do is click search, copy these trade URLs, paste them in a browser, buy the cheapest one. If you're trying to min-max it, pick from the top of the list. These are a little bit better. The 16137 stands out as very, very, very good for the build versus the next closest one is a 17096. So if you have access to a 16137, get it. Get it fast, because if the build is popular, they will all be gone, gone, gone. Now, when we're going to look at the mid-budget, we're looking at spending about 10 Divine on the items. That is 1 to 2 Divine for a Rockiata, 1 Divine for a Replica Feral's Fur, some crafted helmet and gloves. We're using Dark Ray Vectors, a small yoke, some tamings, a Rizlatha's Coil, and we are picking up a Lethal Pride. Now this is not the 16137, this is just a cheaper Lethal Pride in here, and just a Corrupted Blood cannot be inflicted on us jewel with some useful stat on it. Now in this 10 div budget, we are running without conditionals 16.7 million DPS. Very, very solid DPS for a 10 div entry. Again, good effective health, good Fizz max hit, good LE max hit, good chaos hit for a 10 div entry level to the budget here. You're going to be using a life flask on this one because you don't have quite the defenses of the other builds, and we're a little bit lower on life relative to the other builds. And so this is for in the 80s range. You're gonna cap this build out around level 84. Now, as you level up, you're going to want to start taking life nodes on the tree in order to get access to more life so that you can be more defensive as you're progressing into the higher budgets on the build. As far as skills go, very similar. Flicker Strike with our standard additions here. We are running Fortify here, as opposed to having Fortify on the tree. We do have Aspect of the Cat, but we don't attack fast enough to be too concerned with the additional Restoration and Swift Affliction that's necessary. Leap Slam with Assassin's Mark and Blood Range, very typical. And we're running Summon Skitterbots with an Enlighten, a Grace, and a Flesh and Stone. And this would be a level 3 Enlighten, which you can pick up for a much lower budget than the level 4 Enlightens. And we're still within our mana requirements down here. The higher level Enlightens just allow us to run our tinctures for a longer period of time. And that is this tincture right here. And so we are using an attack speed tincture at this budget of the build, whereas the other ones are using LE penetration tinctures. And like I said before, our tree is mostly the same. It's a little bit less because we are lower level, but nothing that you'll need to do any significant respecs on. This Fortify node we have moved off though, so that is available to us on our skill itself right here. Now, in our low budget version of the build, we are running about 1 to 2 divine for everything here. We stuck with mostly uniques strictly for the ease of availability for purchasing these. All of these can be replaced with crafted rare items that give similar stats for like a solo self-found situation. But from a budget perspective, to do good DPS and make them easy to access with the trade league, we are just running straight uniques down this list to make it very simple for you. Now our skills again are mostly the same. We are running Grace and Anger at this point instead of the Enlighten with the Skitterbots and the Flesh and Stone. So you have a little bit less defenses here, a little bit more damage here from your auras. Same thing here for Leap Slam, Assassin's Mark, Mark on Hit, Blood Rage, and Precision with Arrogance, of course, and the standard Flicker Strike setup with Multi-Strike, Life Tap, Immolate, Elemental Damage with Attacks, Trinity. And then we are taking Fortify on the tree right here because we do need some additional damage out of these skills. And so we'll give up a little bit of the fortification buff with the -3 here, but it is necessary to just keep us in order. And this is for very, very early entry into the build. We do need to clip something though, because this dude's 87. That's too high level. I guess technically we don't need this. Yeah, there we go. This will be the tree for the 1 to 2 div low budget entry on the character. Now, as you can see, it scales up very nicely as your budget increases so that you can get to where you need to go. You do not need to have all the items in the next budget to move up to that budget. These are just relative points. So if you had nothing and you wanted to come in and play the character, you know, oh, God, I need about 10 div if I want to play the mid budget, or I need about 50 to 75 div if I want to play in the upper budget. A lot of these items are crafted, and so if you don't know how to craft these items, come by the Twitch channel and we are happy to walk you through the process or help you craft them if you need help crafting them. And as always, if you have any questions about any of this, leave a comment down below on YouTube or come by Twitch. I spend about 75% of my stream just helping people get their characters together, understand why the skills work, how they work together, and how they can scale their character or how they can fix their character. I really enjoy helping people get their characters together. This is my version of teaching in my retirement. So if you do have any questions, please come by. I am absolutely happy to help. The only stupid questions are questions that are not asked. Other than that, thank y'all very much. You have a wonderful day wherever you are. Peace. All right, y'all. Thanks for watching the video. As always, come by Twitch if you have any questions, or check out this video that YouTube thinks you like, or check out our latest upload over there. Peace.